When everyone rose to toast the bride, the billionaire's pregnant black maid was dragged forward to sing, humiliated in front of hundreds. But as her voice cracked and the crowd turned, no one expected what the groom did next, least of all his wife. The morning of the Remington wedding was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt loaded, like a breath being held before something shatters. Outside, the estate gleamed like a page torn out of a bridal magazine. White roses lined the garden path, champagne bottles chilled in silver tubs, and a string quartet rehearsed under the sun. But far from the laughter and flower petals, Naomi Carter was alone, trying to pull up the zipper on a uniform that barely fit her anymore. 6 months pregnant, with her back aching and nerves rattling, Naomi stood in a tiny servant's restroom behind the ballroom. She tugged the fabric over her belly and wiped sweat from her brow with a paper towel. Her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, heart leaping, but it was just a low battery warning. Still no message, still no call. Naomi stared at the screen, at the faded lock screen photo she couldn't bring herself to delete. A blurry picture of a night that was supposed to mean nothing. She was good at being invisible in this house. She was never late, never loud, never in the way. But today, she felt like every breath she took was a mistake. Upstairs, Charlotte Remington, the bride, looked flawless in silk. Her hair was being curled by a stylist flown in from New York. She should have been smiling, but she wasn't. She sat in front of a vanity, swirling champagne in a crystal flute, her jaw clenched tight. She kept glancing at her phone, still open to the message she'd found that morning. A sonogram, sent from an unknown number, to her fiancé's old phone. She wouldn't have seen it if she hadn't accidentally opened the cloud backup, but now that she had, she couldn't unsee the name attached. Naomi Carter, the maid. Her hands tightened around the glass until her knuckles turned white. No one else in the room noticed the shift in her eyes, but Charlotte was already crafting her revenge. She looked into the mirror and said smoothly, "Tell the staff I want Naomi to sing during the ceremony." One of the bridesmaids blinked. "Sing?" "She has a lovely voice," Charlotte said, smiling without warmth. She used to hum in the hallway when she thought no one was listening. "It'll be sweet." Downstairs, Naomi was finishing up the flower centerpieces when she felt someone watching her. She turned, and there Charlotte was. Their eyes locked. Charlotte walked over slowly, voice like honey over ice. "Still remember that song you always hum while cleaning?" Naomi stiffened. I don't think I know what you mean." Charlotte leaned in, still smiling. "You'll remember. You'll be singing it today, just before the vows." Naomi's heart dropped. "Ma'am, I really don't think that's appropriate. It wasn't a suggestion." Charlotte turned and walked away, her heels clicking like punctuation. Naomi stood frozen in place, her hands trembling, her throat tightening. She looked down at her belly, then up at the grand chandelier above her, and in that moment, she knew. This wedding wasn't just going to expose her. It might destroy her. By the time the string quartet began to play, the Remington wedding looked like perfection. Rows of white chairs filled the garden lawn, swaying gently in the breeze. Silk ribbons danced along the aisle. Guests held crystal glasses, smiling beneath designer sunglasses. Cameras flashed as Charlotte Remington stood poised at the top of the steps, a vision in lace. And Naomi. She stood behind the hedges, waiting to be humiliated. A sound technician had placed a wireless mic in her trembling hands, the kind reserved for professional performers, not household staff. She hadn't spoken to anyone since Charlotte's order. She hadn't eaten. She'd nearly collapsed in the servants' bathroom, trying not to cry. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She could hear the guests applauding, the officiant welcoming them all. Then came the moment. Charlotte turned to the crowd, smile wide, voice sweet. "Before we exchange vows, I'd like to share something different, a gift. One of our staff members has the voice of an angel. She's agreed to sing for us, a song very close to our hearts." Charlotte turned, gestured to Naomi. "Naomi, dear, please." Every head turned. Some guests whispered. Others smiled politely, not understanding what was happening. Naomi stepped out slowly, her pregnant belly now fully visible in her tightly stretched uniform. Gasps rippled across the garden. Someone dropped a fork. She didn't meet anyone's eyes until she looked up at him. Ethan Remington, standing at the altar in a sleek charcoal suit, froze. His jaw clenched. His smile vanished. And for one terrifying second, Naomi thought he might speak, might stop this. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at her like she was a ghost come back to life. The pianist began to play, the first few notes of that song. Naomi didn't remember deciding to sing. Her mouth just opened, and the words spilled out like they were being dragged from her. I gave my soul to silence when the world refused my name. The melody cracked on the first line. Her voice wavered, brittle and raw, not because she was nervous, but because she was looking right at Ethan. And he looked shattered. She sang the song they once listened to, that one night. The song that played when she let herself fall for someone she could never have. A song he shouldn't have remembered. But love, it lingers loudest in the places where we break. A tear slipped down her cheek. Charlotte watched with smug satisfaction until she noticed Ethan wasn't watching her. He wasn't even blinking. His entire world had narrowed to the trembling maid standing before him, carrying the child he now knew might be his. And then Naomi's voice cracked completely. She clutched her stomach mid-note, breath hitching as emotion overwhelmed her. Someone in the crowd murmured, "Is she pregnant?" Another voice, "Who is she?" And then, "Is that Ethan looking at her like that?" Naomi finished the last line in a whisper. If truth is cruel, then lies are poison. And as the final note faded into stunned silence, Ethan stepped off the altar. If that moment hit you in the chest, if you felt what Naomi felt while she stood there alone and exposed, then don't just watch. Hit subscribe. Let the world know you believe women like her deserve to be seen, heard, and loved too. Naomi didn't remember how she made it off the garden lawn. One minute she was singing through tears. The next, she was in the service hallway, her hand pressed to her stomach, trying to breathe. She hadn't even waited for the crowd's reaction. She couldn't. The moment she saw Ethan take a step toward her, she ran. Her chest burned, her throat felt raw. But it wasn't just the singing. It was everything. The stares, the whispers, the truth blooming in people's eyes like wildfire. And the worst part? She saw it in his face too. He knew. She burst into the supply closet, slammed the door shut, and slid to the floor. Her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. Tears came harder now, heavier. She whispered to the child she hadn't named yet. "I'm sorry. I didn't want it to happen like this. I was going to leave. I was supposed to disappear quietly." There was a knock. Naomi jolted, but the voice that followed was gentle. "Naomi, it's me. Ethan." She froze. He waited. No force, just silence. Then quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" She couldn't answer. Naomi pulled her knees up, wiped her face, and said through the door, "It didn't matter. You were getting married. You chose your life. I didn't choose to humiliate you." She opened the door just enough to see his face. "No," she said, "but you didn't stop it either." That silence hit harder than any slap. Ethan lowered his eyes. "I was afraid to believe it was true. I saw your face. I heard the song. I knew, but I froze." Naomi stepped back, closing the gap between them just enough to whisper, "That's all I needed to know." She started to close the door again, but Ethan caught it, not to push it open, just to hold it still. "I made a mistake, Naomi, but I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had—" She shook her head. "You did know. Maybe not with your head, but in your heart. You did. And you still let her use me." Tears pooled in Ethan's eyes now, but Naomi stepped back, placed his hand over her stomach, just once, and whispered, "This isn't about you anymore. It's about protecting them." And then she closed the door. On the other side of the mansion, Charlotte Remington stood at the altar with a forced smile, pretending the performance was part of the schedule. She poured another glass of champagne with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. The guests were murmuring. Some were checking their phones, others were whispering, and someone was asking for the event planner, because something was clearly wrong. Charlotte didn't care. She turned to her maid of honor, eyes cold. "Where is she?" The bridesmaid hesitated. "She left. I think Ethan followed her." Charlotte's eye twitched. "Then this wedding isn't over until I say it is." A storm had been brewing since morning, the kind that rolls in without warning, angry and electric. By mid-afternoon, the skies over the Remington estate had turned dark grey, thunder rumbling like a warning shot. The wedding planner tried to keep guests calm as the clouds rolled in. The DJ packed up. The caterers covered the buffet tables in plastic, and the guests, confused, murmuring, began retreating indoors. But Naomi had nowhere to retreat. She stood in the corner of the lower hallway, arms wrapped around herself, staring out the glass doors as the first drops of rain hit the marble patio. She had been waiting for her ride for over an hour. The driver she booked stopped answering. Roads were closing. Trees falling. No one was leaving the Remington estate tonight. Of course, of all days, of all moments, she was trapped. With him. With her. Charlotte. Somewhere upstairs, Charlotte paced barefoot through her bridal suite, hair undone, dress off, fury rising. The event had officially been postponed. But Charlotte had never lost anything in her life. Not a game, not a man, and definitely not the spotlight. She wasn't going to start now. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the guest lounge, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. His bow tie was undone, his jacket discarded, and all he could hear was Naomi's voice, singing that song, with tears in her throat. He should have said something, should have stopped it. He'd failed her again. He stood up suddenly, like a decision had just snapped into place. He had to talk to her. Not to fix everything, just to face her. He found Naomi by the garden doors, watching the rain. "They say storms cleanse the air," he said gently. She didn't look at him. "Or flood the people who never asked for it." He stood beside her, close, but not too close. "Naomi, I need you to know something." She finally looked at him, eyes swollen, guarded, but listening. "When we were together that night, I told myself it meant nothing, that it was a mistake. But I lied. Not to you. To me." Silence. Naomi exhaled slowly. "I never expected you to leave her. I knew what I was walking into. But I didn't know I was walking away from you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Folded paper. Her resignation letter. The one she'd left on his desk months ago. "I've kept this, all this time." Naomi took it, carefully, quietly. "I left to protect the baby," she said, "to protect myself." "And I let you walk away," Ethan said. "Because I was afraid of what loving you would cost me." The lights flickered, thunder cracked, the moment stretched. She asked gently, "And now?" He looked her in the eyes. "Now I'm terrified of what not loving you is already costing me." They stood there, two people on the edge of something too big to name, but just as the silence softened, the door behind them opened. Charlotte. Her makeup was smeared, hair wet from stepping out into the storm, eyes sharp like knives. She looked at Ethan, then at Naomi, and smiled. "Hope I'm not interrupting. At this point, what do you think Ethan should do? Stay in control or follow his heart? Drop your prediction in the comments." Charlotte didn't yell. She didn't scream or throw a drink or break a vase. She simply stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and stood in front of Ethan and Naomi, like she was already holding a verdict. Her wet hair clung to her collarbone. Her hands were calm. Too calm. "So, this is what's been going on behind my back," she said softly. "Or maybe not behind. Maybe I've just been too trusting." Ethan moved protectively in front of Naomi, just slightly. A small, almost imperceptible shift. But Charlotte saw it, and it told her everything. "You know," she said, voice cold but steady. "I used to wonder why you never looked at me the way you did that night at the engagement party. Thought maybe I was imagining things. Until now." She turned to Naomi. "You were never supposed to be anything more than background noise. But look at you. You've become the whole story." Naomi didn't respond. Her hands were folded gently over her belly. Her eyes held pain, but no apology. Charlotte's lip twitched. "How far along are you?" Naomi answered quietly. 26 weeks. Charlotte did the math out loud. 6 months. So not just a fling, not a maybe. She turned to Ethan. You knew when you saw her walk out there, didn't you?" He didn't deny it. Charlotte stepped forward, holding something in her hand. A folded paper, creased, worn. "You left this in your suit pocket," she said to Ethan. "A letter, from her, dated 4 months ago." She unfolded it and read aloud. "Dear Ethan, I never meant to make things complicated. I'll be gone by the time you read this. Please don't try to find me. This was never your burden to carry." She looked up. "So why didn't you let her go?" Ethan's voice was low. "Because I already lost her once. I'm not making that mistake again." Charlotte's laugh cracked like thunder. "You think you can throw away our marriage and run after your maid with a baby? Do you have any idea what this will do to your name, to your company, to your family?" Naomi stepped forward now, her voice calm, clear. "He doesn't owe you his name, and I don't want his money. I just want my child to grow up without shame." Charlotte blinked, and for a brief second, just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, something softer, something that almost looked like heartbreak. "Do you think I haven't known what it feels like to be discarded?" she whispered. "To be replaced?" Ethan looked at her. The walls she'd spent years building were cracking. "I didn't replace you," he said gently. "I just stopped pretending." Charlotte stood there, breathing hard. For the first time that day, she looked truly human. Not polished, not perfect, just lost. "Then finish what you started," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Tell them all." And with that, she turned and walked out. The rain had stopped, but the silence afterward was louder than thunder. The Remington estate, once buzzing with clinking glasses and orchestras, now felt like a shell, empty, echoing with truths no one wanted to admit out loud. Ethan found Naomi sitting on the back steps of the service quarters, her dress damp from where she'd leaned against the stone, her eyes locked on the dark clouds parting above the horizon. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside her. The silence wasn't awkward. It was familiar, soft, like a song you hadn't heard in years, but somehow still knew all the words to. Naomi spoke first. "I used to sit right here every night after shift, just to get a moment to myself, before everything went back to silence." Ethan glanced sideways. "I wish I had found you here sooner," she gave him a tired smile. "You were too busy being perfect." They both laughed, just a little. "I wasn't perfect," he said. "I was polite, well-dressed, good at smiling in photos, but I wasn't me. Not until I met you." Naomi turned her head. "We only had one night, Ethan. One moment. You don't fall in love in one moment." He paused. "No, but you can spend every moment after trying to forget it, and failing." Naomi didn't know what to say, so she let the quiet fill the space between them again. The wind brushed gently through the trees. Somewhere in the distance a baby cried. Someone else's child. She placed a hand over her stomach. "They deserve better than this," she whispered. "Not scandal, not whispers behind their back. Just love. A clean start." Ethan looked down at her hand, then slowly, carefully, reached over and placed his hand beside hers. "Then let's give them that. No matter how messy this gets, no matter who leaves." Naomi looked into his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't avoiding her. He wasn't hiding. She leaned her head on his shoulder, They sat like that, the billionaire and the maid, the scandal and the secret, saying nothing, and somehow saying everything. If you've made it this far, your heart's already in this story. So don't just watch them fight for love. Stand with them. Hit subscribe and let's keep telling stories that remind people love doesn't care about status, only truth. The soft moment lasted, until the door creaked open behind them. It was the estate manager. "Naomi, there's someone at the front gate asking for you." She frowned. "Who?" "Didn't say. Just handed this over." He passed her a small manila envelope. No name, no return address. Just one word written on it in bold ink. Truth. Naomi stared at it. Ethan leaned in. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single photo. Naomi's eyes widened. Her breath hitched. Her hands began to shake. Ethan looked at the image. His face drained of color. "Who gave you this?" he demanded. But Naomi couldn't speak, because the photo was of the two of them, in bed. From that night, taken from the hallway, someone had been watching. The sun had gone down. What was supposed to be the wedding night of the year had turned into whispers, cancelled flights and closed doors. But inside the Remington estate, something far worse was still unfolding. Naomi sat frozen on the guest room bed, the photo still trembling in her hands. The image of her and Ethan, captured in a moment meant for no one but them, was undeniable. "Who would have taken this?" she asked quietly. Ethan paced the room. "It's not just the photo. It's the timing, the envelope, the message. Someone waited for today." Naomi stood up, her voice shaking. "This wasn't about exposing us. This was about destroying us." And then, a knock at the door. Ethan opened it. Charlotte stood there, calm, cold, collected. She didn't speak right away, just looked past him, at Naomi, and smiled like a woman who had already buried the body. "We should talk," she said. Ethan blocked the doorway. "Not now." "No," Naomi said from behind him, eyes steady, voice rising. "Let her talk." Ethan stepped aside, reluctantly. Charlotte walked in, holding a small silver box in her hands. This was a wedding gift. Never got to open it. She flipped it open. Inside was a flash drive. "I had a suspicion, months ago. Installed a camera in the guest hallway, just in case one of the staff got curious." Naomi blinked. "You filmed us?" Charlotte shrugged. "You lied to me. Worked under my roof. Carried his child. You don't get to act shocked that I stopped trusting you. You humiliated me in front of everyone." "Because you deserved it," Charlotte snapped. The room went silent. Charlotte's hands were shaking now. She looked at Ethan, eyes wide, voice trembling for the first time. "I was supposed to be your family, and you gave all your softness to her, all your protection, all your honesty. I loved you, Ethan, even when it was hard, even when you were cold. But she turned to Naomi, venom rising. "She got the real you." Naomi stepped forward, tears streaming now. "I didn't plan this. I never wanted to be the other woman. I just wanted to disappear. But I couldn't. Because there's a baby growing inside me who deserves to know love that isn't built on fear." Charlotte scoffed. "Love? You think what you two have is love?" She held up the flash drive. "This goes public, and his empire crumbles. He loses everything, and so do you. You'll be nothing but a step closer. Then do it." Charlotte blinked. "What?" "Send it. Leak it. Post it. I'm done hiding." Ethan looked between them, speechless. "You think I care about whispers?" Naomi said. "I've spent my entire life being whispered about, but this child, my child, will never grow up learning to bow, or beg, or hide." She turned to Ethan. "You said you weren't going to lose me again, but I'm not yours to lose, unless you fight for me." She walked past him, past Charlotte, toward the door. But just before leaving, she turned back one last time. "Choose, both of you. Decide who you want to be. Not for the cameras, not for your legacies, for yourselves. And with that, Naomi walked out, leaving them in the rubble of the life they'd built around lies. The house had gone eerily quiet, the kind of silence that didn't come from peace, but from aftermath. Everyone was in a different room now, but all three of them were standing in the same place emotionally, alone. Naomi sat in the dim staff lounge, hands resting on her belly, eyes red from tears that wouldn't stop falling. She had nothing left to defend, no more secrets, no more shield. And still, she had never felt more proud of herself. She spoke softly. Her voice meant only for the child inside her. I told the truth. I stood my ground. If that means we walk this road alone, then so be it. But I'll never let anyone treat us like a mistake again. A knock echoed on the door. Naomi didn't move. Come in, or don't. I'm done chasing people who hesitate. The door creaked open, but it wasn't Ethan. It was one of the elderly housekeepers, the one who had worked there for decades. She didn't say anything, just walked over and gently placed a folded baby blanket on Naomi's lap. It was mine once, the woman said. Now it's yours, for the next brave girl. And then she left. No judgment, no advice, just solidarity. Elsewhere, Ethan stood alone in his father's old study, the same place where he was taught to shake hands like a businessman, but never taught how to hold someone he loved. He stared out the rain-streaked window, the flash drive Charlotte had left on the desk glinting under the lamp. His entire legacy sat in that little silver shell, his father's name, the Remington brand, his spotless reputation, everything they'd built. He picked it up, held it. Is this who I still am? He whispered. A man who chooses silence to survive? He walked to the fireplace, stared into the flames for a long moment. Then dropped the flash drive in, watched it burn. Upstairs, Charlotte stood at the vanity, her wedding gown still on the chair where she threw it hours earlier. She was no longer angry, no longer righteous, just emptied out. She touched the photo of her and Ethan from years ago, framed in gold. They looked happy, but now she couldn't remember if it was real or just curated. She whispered to the air, I gave him everything I was allowed to give, but I never gave him my truth, because I didn't even know what it was. Her hands trembled. She pulled off her wedding ring, and finally let herself cry. Naomi stood near the kitchen exit, coat over her shoulders, suitcase by her side. She hadn't said goodbye. She wasn't waiting for permission. She was choosing herself, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The car she'd called had arrived. She took one last look at the house behind her, the place where she'd been invisible, where she'd been shamed, and where, against all odds, she'd finally found her voice. 1 year later, the Remington estate looked different. The hedges weren't trimmed to perfection anymore. The fountain in the driveway had been turned off, and the Remington name, no longer the headline of glossy magazines, but there was life, real life. Out back, in a quiet sunlit garden, a small gathering had formed. There were no chandeliers, no photographers, no designer gowns, just folding chairs, a few neighbors, and a little boy in a stroller, tugging at his balloon string with chubby fingers and sleepy eyes. Naomi stood under a floral arch in a soft white dress that hugged her now-healed figure. No veil, no diamonds, just truth. And when she began to sing, the same song from that day a year ago, her voice didn't crack. It soared. I gave my soul to silence when the world refused my name. But love, it lingers loudest in the places where we break. There were tears in a few eyes, smiles on others, and in the front row, holding their son in his arms, stood Ethan. He hadn't just shown up that day. He had built that day. He had found Naomi in a small apartment outside the city. He didn't come with flowers or grand speeches, just a bag of groceries, a box of baby clothes, and a notebook full of letters he had written but never sent. You don't have to forgive me, he said, but I will spend the rest of my life showing our child that love doesn't run. Not anymore." Naomi didn't answer that day, but she didn't close the door either. Now, under the soft blush of afternoon light, Naomi turned from the microphone and walked into Ethan's arms. There were no vows, no priest, no promises scribbled on napkins, just this. Ethan kissed her forehead, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Thank you for waiting, even when I didn't deserve it." Naomi replied, "Thank you for coming back when I thought no one would." Their son babbled happily between them. Across the garden, a car pulled up. A figure stepped out in sunglasses, dressed in a neutral cream dress and flats. Charlotte. She didn't walk toward the chairs, didn't interrupt. She stood at a distance and watching. Her posture wasn't cold, wasn't broken, just quiet. Naomi saw her. Their eyes met, and Naomi nodded, not in forgiveness, but in peace. Charlotte gave the faintest smile, then got back in her car and drove away. It didn't end with a stage or a scandal or a ceremony wrapped in gold. It ended with truth and began again with love, the kind that doesn't need perfection, only presence. Do you believe true love can survive even after being tested this hard? Or does love like this only exist in stories like these? Tell us what you believe. Drop your truth in the comments. And if this story touched you, if it made you feel seen or angry or healed, hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch love fight, stand for it.